there is an amazing thing that happens to you when you start learning the stories of the Agada, of these ancient rabbinical stories. You start realizing that the rabbis who created these laws, they were very deep people themselves. And Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel actually says that when people have this assumption that Judaism is just about laws, the rabbis are just obsessed with details and laws, he says, how could you ever say that if you've read Agada? Because if you've read Agada, you realize that the very same rabbis who are making the laws have these very profound insights and thoughts. And so Agada really helps you enter in to the world of the people who are making the laws, like you said last week. And so I want to read together an Agada, a statement and a bit of a story from one of the Gemaras about how the laws of the Shemona Esrei were written, the main Jewish prayer, and specifically the bracha of V'lamal Shenim, which is the prayer about enemies, about praying, protect us from our enemies. So this is the Gemara. It is Gemara Brachot 28b. Tanan Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Shimon HaPakuli wrote the Shemona Esrei Brachot, the 18 blessings, in their order. Seder. Before Rabbi Gamliel in Yavne. Rabbi Gamliel said to the sages, can anyone among you write the blessing about the negative, the wicked person? Shmuel HaKatan came down and wrote it. Okay, so before I let you, I give you the opportunity to respond to this Gemara, I want to bring Rav Kook, just because whenever I learn Gemaras, I always straight away I want to see what he says, because he wrote commentaries. I know you love reading the Maharal. Ben Ish Chai has an incredible commentary. The Maharsha has an incredible commentary. It's amazing to realize there were these rabbis who were fascinated with these stories. So Rav Kook says about this story that it's not hard to write a prayer about love and beauty. Rav Kook says, I guess because he really believes people are naturally good, it's very easy to pray about, I hope everybody gets healed. What's hard to do is to pray about protect me from somebody who's hurting me. And the reason why it's hard, Rav Kook says, is because I might start bringing in these negativity that I have towards the person. In other words, racism. So like, let's say, a person, an African American in the 50s and 60s, let's take Malcolm X as a great example. So he would often say Malcolm X, as opposed to Martin Luther King, who was more gentle. Malcolm X would say, if any white person comes near me, by any means necessary, I will hurt him. And people took it in a very, very negative way. They thought like he's vicious toward them. And maybe he was vicious, meaning he thought he was just, it's my moral responsibility to stand up for myself. But it's hard to say, I'm going to protect myself against somebody, because often I can bring in these negative feelings I have towards them. It's not just about protection. Maybe I hate them, I'm angry at them, I want to see their downfall. So Rav Kook says that Shimon HaPakuli is famous for the quote in Pirkei Avot that you should not rejoice when your enemies fall. And therefore only he had the ability to talk about our enemies and make a beautiful, how to write down how we're going to pray for a long time. Jewish people pray out of his bracha every day, without this anger towards our enemies, and rather with this more, I need to be protective of them because they're going to hurt me. Another way to think about this is I don't hate the sinner, I hate the sin. And so Rav Kook really thinks this whole story, the reason why they wrote it down was to teach us that you have to be careful when you pray about your enemies, that you're praying that I'm protected from them, but not that they should be wiped out necessarily. I mean, we'd much rather that they do tshuva. There's another famous story about Rabbi Meir and Bruria, and his wife Bruria tells him, don't pray for the enemies to be destroyed, you should pray for them to do tshuva. So I guess the underlying theme for Rav Kook of this Agada is only very rare people have the sensitivity to say, yes, we need to protect ourselves from dangerous people, but no, I don't hate them. Any thoughts? Maybe a different interpretation, additions?
I very much appreciate the point that we're not looking to wipe out enemies, other nations. We have to protect ourselves against those who try to inflict harm on us. But as a tefillah, being a broader vision, a hope for a world better than the one that we live in, the goal is not to wipe out other nations, other people, but to wipe out the chet, to wipe out the risha, as opposed to the evil doings, as opposed to the rasha, the person himself. And the Maharal also points that out in that specific bracha as well, that we're looking to have the inequity and the sin and all those negative things evaporate from the world and not the people. So I think that's a very important point. The person who actually writes this bracha, Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel the Small. So, I don't know, I imagine him being maybe like a very physically large guy. They call him Shmuel HaKatan, but probably, or at least my reading of it is that he's a very humble person. Even though he might be a great Torah giant, or whatever his physical stature is, it was actually cool to be fat back in those days. That was, they were praised for how large they are. And the Gemara talks about different stories of how physically large they are and how much better they were because they were physically large. But here I think we're talking about Shmuel HaKatan is a humble person. So who is the one that's going to write the tefillah about how we relate to those who are trying to harm us, or trying to, harm us? Only someone who sees himself in a humble way. That person, not from a place of racism, the language that you used when you introduced this, a place of we're better than them, we're God's chosen people. None of that. We have to come from a place of humility. We are who we are. We have our gift to give to the world. We also don't want to get trampled along the way.
And I like how this Gemara is struggling with the question of, we need to write a prayer that helps people express their frustration that there are dangerous people in the world, but we don't want to be training them to develop their hatred. So you have to be very, very delicate in giving people the ability to express their frustration, but not to encourage them to, get more and more hatred. And I was thinking of in behaviorist psychology. Skinner was the founder of behaviorist psychology. He was very big into positive reinforcement, also negative reinforcement. If you give a reward all the time to your child, so then they'll eventually realize that this action is good. And if you punish them constantly, negative reinforcement, they'll realize it's bad. But what he didn't realize, Eric from another psychologist had this critique of him, is it's not just giving a reward or giving a punishment, it's how you give the reward and how you give the punishment. And the reason I want to relate this to what we're doing here is it's not enough to pray and do an action. It's the way you're doing. You have to be thinking of doing it in a certain way. So if I'm giving a reward to my daughter, but she went to school and she was so good, so I gave her candy, which often happens when I pick her up. If I'm not looking at her when I give her the present, so what did the present do? I have to give her affection, emotional intelligence while I'm doing the action. So I think the same is true here. The action of V'lamal Shanim, of saying every day, Hashem protect me from these negative enemies in the world. Obviously if we were in Nazi Germany in the 30s, 40s, we would have for sure been thinking of the Nazis when we were praying this. Would we have been thinking of all Germans though? Maybe that's what Shmuel HaKatan comes to teach us, that I'm praying that the Nazis, let's say I was in the 30s or 40s, should be wiped out, the ideology should be wiped out. But if any German in that time wanted to change their opinion, and there were righteous Gentiles, and actually stand up for Jews, so I'm not praying about you, because I don't hate Germans. I hate the way it's been taken, it's been interpreted, this nationalistic, egotistic Nazi ideology, anti-Semitic, but people are good intrinsically. So I think it's important, maybe when you're praying V'lamal Shanim, this prayer in the Amidah, to think, I'm praying Shmuel HaKatan's prayer. And that will affect the action you're doing. It's not enough to do the action, I have to have the intention, and that will affect the ability of the action, to have a positive effect on me and not a negative one.
Yeah, that's very nice. I had never thought about this as a prayer, as a way to express internal frustration towards something in the world that I feel frustrated with. To give it
venting.
That's to give it tangibility through words. To take to vent. Yeah, that's very nice. One of the critiques of tefillah, and I remember hearing this a lot. When there was the shooting in Parkland a couple months ago now, which shook me very deeply because Parkland is 10 minutes from where I grew up. It was the other high school. And so there was some emails and Facebook things going around that's basically, save your thoughts and prayers, right? We don't want thoughts and prayers. We want action. We want legislative action. We want, action against guns. And where is the place for thoughts and prayers? How does this work? Not sure exactly where I'm going to go with this, but and my sense of tefillah is it's the opening stance towards action, whatever the appropriate action is for this. In other words, don't just send thoughts and prayers. And I think that's one of the critiques. If you're going to sit there on your couch and send thoughts and prayers for something that needs action, right? This kind of Facebook, what do they call it? Facebook advocacy or whatever it is, where people are just liking something and that's showing their support of it. Okay, there's something to that, but obviously there's much more we could do. But tefillah should be the opening towards some sort of action, some sort of movement towards it. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why we need Shmuel HaKatan, again, someone who is clearly the humblest of the group amongst those who were by the name that he was given, and that way he is helping us to align what the appropriate action would be, because tefillah has to be something that's connected to action, or it just kind of stays static.
We'll finish, I guess, with this idea. I think the fact that they were struggling to find somebody to write this bracha sheds light on, there probably were some people who were rabbis back then who really were racist towards Romans and Greek, and for good reason. Meaning, we're talking about they got pogroms, oppressed, rape, murder, genocide, really bad stuff done to them. So it makes sense, just the reaction would be, I hate your kind, no matter what. And I love the emotional intelligence of Rabbi Gamliel, who is the head of the rabbis. I mean, he says, I'm not even at that. I'm angry. Maybe something happened to his family. I can't write this prayer. I don't have enough clarity. Who is a rabbi? Who is a spiritual seeker who has got the clarity to write down, on the one hand, we have to be realistic, they're enemies. On the other hand, I hate the evil within inside and not the evil person.